Chapter 1. The Night Market. The scar began at Alara's temple and traced a jagged line down to her jaw, a pale river through darker skin that made strangers look away. She'd stopped counting the turned heads years ago, stopped hoping the whispers would fade. Tonight, she pulled her hood lower and moved through the night market like a ghost, invisible by choice rather than curse. The market sprawled through the old quarter of Ashenmere, where gas lamps cast more shadow than light and the air smelled of rain-soaked stone and overripe fruit. Alara kept to the edges, her basket empty, her coin purse lighter than it should be. She wasn't here to buy. She was here because the boarding house felt too small, too quiet, too full of memories of the life she'd left behind. 3 months since the fire. 3 months since Marcus had looked at her ruined face and decided his love had limits after all. She touched the scar without meaning to, then dropped her hand. The gesture had become habit, checking, confirming, remembering. Lovely night for the forgotten, isn't it? The voice came from behind her, low and dark as smoke. Alara spun, heart hammering, and found herself staring at a man who didn't belong in this part of the city. His coat was too fine, his bearing too controlled, his face too beautiful to be real. Dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that seemed deliberately careless. His eyes caught the lamplight and threw it back wrong, too bright, too still, like polished stones at the bottom of a well. "I'm not forgotten," Alara said, hating how her voice shook. "I'm here. Are you?" He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You move like you're apologizing for taking up space, like you think no one sees you." "Maybe I prefer it that way." Liar. The word held no malice, only certainty. He stepped closer, and Alara noticed he cast no shadow, despite standing directly beneath a lamp. Her breath caught. Impossible. Tricks of the light. Had to be. Before she could step back, shouts erupted from the far end of the market. The crowd rippled, bodies pressing together in panic. Alara heard the word vampire whispered like a curse, passed from mouth to mouth. Her blood went cold. Everyone knew the stories. The great houses that ruled from their estates beyond the city walls, the blood oaths that bound servant families for generations, the night courts where immortal lords settled disputes with games and executions. But vampires didn't come to markets. They didn't walk among humans unless... Run. The beautiful man's voice had changed, gone sharp with command. Now. Alara saw them then, moving through the scattering crowd with predatory grace. 3 figures in dark clothes, their movements too fluid, too fast. One of them looked directly at her, and she saw hunger in his eyes that had nothing to do with blood. "She's marked," one of them called out, pointing at Alara. "House Karras claimed her yesterday. The blood seal is fresh." Alara touched her neck, feeling only her own pulse beneath her fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about." The beautiful man moved. One moment he stood beside her. The next he was between her and the advancing vampires. His body a wall of sudden violence held in check. "House Karras has no claim here. This is neutral ground." "She bears the mark," the lead vampire snarled. "We can smell it. Then your noses are as dull as your wit. The girl is under my protection." He spoke the words like an invocation, and Alara felt something shift in the air. A weight, a pressure, like storm clouds gathering overhead. "You dare invoke blood right, Cassian?" The vampire's voice dripped venom. "After everything House Vale did to ours? After the purge, Cassian?" The name meant nothing to Alara, but it clearly meant something to them. The 3 vampires drew back, not in retreat, but in reassessment, circling like wolves around a wounded elk. "I dare much more than that," Cassian said softly. Too softly. "Test me." The marketplace had emptied, vendors and customers fleeing down side streets and into shuttered shops. Alara stood frozen, her back against a wall, watching 3 immortal predators face one. The mathematics didn't work in their favor, or hers. The lead vampire lunged. Cassian moved like water, like wind, impossibly fast. His hand caught the attacker's throat mid-leap and slammed him into the cobblestones hard enough to crack stone. The other 2 came at him from both sides, and Alara saw the glint of blades. Not steel, but something darker, something that seemed to drink the lamplight. Blood sprayed. Not vampire blood. Alara knew instinctively, but her own. One of the attackers had grabbed her, using her as a shield, and the knife at her throat burned like ice. "Call off your claim, Cassian," the vampire hissed in her ear. "Or I open her from ear to ear and let House Karas deal with the consequences." Cassian went still. Utterly, completely still, in a way no living thing should be able to achieve. His eyes found Alara's across the space between them, and she saw something flicker in their depths. Recognition? Regret? She couldn't tell. "Let her go," Cassian said, and his voice had gone quiet again, dangerous again. "She's mortal. She doesn't understand what's happening here. This is between our houses." "Then you shouldn't have claimed her." The blade pressed harder, and Alara felt warmth trickle down her neck. Her scar throbbed in sympathy, old pain echoing new. She didn't think. Thinking would have stopped her. Instead, she drove her elbow back into her captor's ribs with all her weight behind it. The vampire barely flinched, but his grip loosened, just enough. Alara twisted, dropped, and scrambled away on hands and knees across blood-slick cobblestones. The world exploded into violence. Cassian was on the vampire before Alara could draw breath, moving with a savagery that made their earlier fight look like dancing. She heard bones break, heard screams that didn't sound entirely human, heard her own pulse thundering in her ears. She pressed her hand to her bleeding throat and watched as Cassian tore through two of the vampires like they were made of paper. The third ran. Cassian let him go. Then he was standing over her, breathing hard, though she suspected he didn't actually need to breathe, with blood on his hands and murder in his eyes. For a moment, Alara was certain she'd traded one death for another. "You're bleeding," Cassian said. Just that, as if it explained everything. "I'll live," Alara managed. Her voice sounded distant, dreamlike. "Shock, probably." She'd read about shock in the medical texts she'd studied before the fire, before Marcus, before everything fell apart. "Yes," Cassian said, and something in his tone made her look up. "You will, but not here. Not tonight. They'll come back with more. House Karas doesn't forget a slight, and you just became one." He held out his hand, clean now, though she'd seen it covered in blood seconds ago. Alara stared at it, at him, at the empty marketplace and the two bodies that were already dissolving into ash. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone who just made a very dangerous promise on your behalf." His mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't looked so much like a wound. "And someone who's about to compound that mistake by taking you somewhere safe." "I don't even know you." "No," Cassian agreed. "But you're bleeding from a wound given in a house feud, which means by old law, you're entitled to sanctuary until the blood debt is paid. I'm offering that sanctuary. You can accept, or you can try your luck with Karas assassins. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice at all. Alara took his hand. His skin was cold, not unpleasantly so, but wrong, the temperature of marble in winter. His fingers closed around hers with unexpected gentleness. "What's your name?" he asked as he pulled her to her feet. "Alara." The name felt strange on her tongue, as if she were introducing someone she used to be. "Alara Thorne." "Well, Alara Thorne." Cassian kept hold of her hand as he led her toward a narrow street she'd never noticed before. "Welcome to the world behind the world. Try not to die in the next hour. It would complicate things considerably." Chapter 2. The House of Ash and Silence. The carriage came from nowhere, black as pitch and drawn by horses that moved too quietly for living animals. Alara sat rigid on the velvet seat, her hand still pressed to the shallow cut on her throat, watching Cassian through the dim interior light. He sat across from her, perfectly still in that unnatural way of his eyes fixed on something beyond the window. "You're not going to explain?" Alara finally asked. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "What just happened back there? What am I marked with? What is House Karas?" All excellent questions with complicated answers. Cassian's gaze shifted to her, and in the close space of the carriage, the wrongness of him was harder to ignore. Too pale, too perfect, too still. The short version. Vampire society is divided into houses, old families bound by blood and oath. House Karas is one of 7 ruling families. They've been expanding their territory, claiming mortals through blood marks, a form of ownership that predates written law. Ownership, Ilara repeated, tasting the word like poison. Slavery. In practice, yes, though they dress it up in prettier language. Protection, patronage, service. His mouth curved into something bitter. The old ways are returning. We had 2 centuries of relative peace, of coexistence. That's ending. The carriage rattled over rough stones, climbing upward. Ilara glimpsed narrow streets giving way to broader avenues, then to walls and gates. And you? What house are you? House Vile, or what's left of it. He said it without emotion, but Ilara heard the weight beneath the words. We were the 6th great house until 15 years ago. Then we backed the wrong side in a succession dispute, and House Carries led the purge. 300 vampires executed in a single night, blood oaths broken, names struck from the records. But you survived. I was away. Simple words that held an ocean of guilt. By the time I returned, my house was ash. My family was gone. I've spent 15 years in the shadows, staying alive, staying out of sight. And then tonight, I broke every rule I've followed to keep breathing. He leaned forward slightly, and the lamplight caught his eyes, turning them briefly silver, because some idiot from House Kiras decided to put his mark on a human girl in a neutral market, which violates 3 different accords. And when they came to collect her, I couldn't. He stopped. Drew back, his hands curled into fists on his knees. Couldn't what? Ilara asked softly. Couldn't let them take you. The admission seemed to cost him. I don't know why. I should have walked away, should have let the courts handle it through proper channels. But I looked at you and He shook his head. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I invoked blood right, which means under old law. You're under House Vale's protection until the matter is resolved. But House Vale doesn't exist anymore. Exactly. Cassian smiled without humor, which makes this entire situation legally fascinating and practically suicidal. The carriage stopped. Through the window, Ilara saw iron gates opening onto a long drive lined with dead trees. At the end of the drive stood a house, no, an estate, rising against the night sky like something from a ghost story. Gothic towers, crumbling stone, windows dark as blind eyes. This is your home? She asked. This is where I hide, Cassian corrected. He opened the carriage door and stepped out, then offered his hand again. Ilara hesitated, then took it. The night air was cold against her face, carrying the scent of old roses and older earth. The house felt abandoned as they approached. No lights in the windows, no servants rushing out to greet their master. Just silence and shadow and the sound of their footsteps on gravel. Ilara pulled her cloak tighter, suddenly aware of how alone they were. I should tell you, Cassian said, as he unlocked the front door. A massive thing of black wood and iron. I live here alone. Have for years. There's no staff, no guards. Just me and too many empty rooms. He pushed the door open, and Ilara caught the smell of dust and old books and something else. Something metallic. If that makes you uncomfortable, I can arrange other accommodations. But they won't be as safe. Ilara thought of the boarding house, her tiny room, the landlady who'd stopped meeting her eyes after Marcus left, thought of the market and the vampire's knife at her throat. How long do I have to stay? Until the blood debt is satisfied or until House Karis withdraws their claim? He lit a lamp with a match that flared too bright. Could be days, could be months, could be never, if they decide to make this about house honor rather than legal precedent. And if I leave before then, they'll kill you. He said it matter-of-factly, without drama. The mark they tried to place makes you theirs in their eyes. I interrupted the ritual, but the intent was there. They'll hunt you until they have you or until you're dead. Those are the only 2 outcomes they recognize. Ilara's legs suddenly felt weak. She leaned against the doorframe, the reality of her situation finally crashing through the shock. I don't understand any of this. I'm nobody. Why would they even want to mark me? Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then, may I see your neck? The place where he cut you? Ilara dropped her hand from her throat. The bleeding had stopped, but she could still feel the sting. Cassian approached slowly, telegraphing his movements like someone trying not to spook a frightened animal. He tilted her chin up with gentle fingers, studying the wound in the lamplight. His breath caught. Not much, just a small hitch that might have meant nothing. But his eyes widened, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely shaken. "What?" Alara demanded. "What is it?" "You're not nobody," Cassian said quietly. "You're blood-marked, yes, but not by House Karras." He traced the air above her scar, not touching, just following the path of it with his finger. "This scar, how did you get it?" "A fire. 3 months ago." "And before the fire, did anyone ever tell you that you had old blood? Heritage from the founding families?" Alara shook her head. "My parents died when I was young. I was raised in the city orphanage. No family history, no records. Why?" Cassian stepped back, running a hand through his hair. The first truly human gesture she'd seen from him. "Because this scar isn't just a scar. It's a blood seal, old magic. The kind that marks someone as belonging to one of the original bloodlines. The families that existed before the houses, before the turning, when humans and vampires shared power equally." He laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "House Karras didn't mark you tonight. They tried to claim you. There's a difference. They must have discovered what you are, and they moved to bind you before anyone else could." "What I am?" Alara's voice rose. "I'm a seamstress. I'm nobody. I have no power, no money, no—" "You have blood that remembers when humans made vampires kneel," Cassian interrupted. His eyes held hers, intense and burning. "That's why they want you. That's why I can't let them have you. Because if House Karras gets their hands on someone with founder blood, they'll use you to legitimize their power grab. They'll bind you, break you, and turn you into a symbol of human submission." The words hung between them in the dusty entryway. Alara felt dizzy, untethered. "This is insane. You're insane. I need to go home." "Home to what?" Cassian asked, not unkindly. "The life where everyone looks away from your face? Where your fiancé left you because you weren't perfect anymore? Where you work your fingers raw for pennies and pretend you're not drowning?" He shook his head. "I know it's terrifying. I know you don't want this. But you walked into something tonight that's bigger than both of us, and the only way out is through." Alara wanted to argue, wanted to run, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she felt her knees buckle. Cassian caught her before she fell, his arms strong and steady and impossibly cold. "I've got you," he murmured, and despite everything, Alara believed him. He carried her through the dark house, up a grand staircase thick with dust, to a room that might have been beautiful once. Now it was just clean and cold, with a bed made up in fresh linens and a fire laid in the hearth. "Sleep," Cassian said, setting her down with unexpected gentleness. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." "Where will you be?" Alara asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Nearby. Vampires don't sleep the way humans do, but I'll rest." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Alara, lock this door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me. The house is warded, but wards can be broken. How will I know it's you?" He smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human. Almost. "I'll say your name 3 times. Old magic. True names have power. Another thing your blood should remember." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Alara stared at it for a long moment before stumbling over to turn the lock. The click sounded very loud in the silence. She looked around the room, at the faded wallpaper, the heavy curtains, the mirror that showed her reflection, a scarred girl in a torn cloak, standing in a vampire's house marked by magic she didn't understand. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, and somewhere in that darkness Alara knew House Karras was already hunting. Chapter 3. The morning after night. Alara woke to silence so complete it felt like drowning. No street sounds, no neighbors, no clatter of the boarding house waking around her. Just stillness and the pale gray light of early morning filtering through heavy curtains. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all. Then she sat up, and her neck throbbed where the vampire's knife had kissed her throat. She touched the wound, already scabbing over, painful but shallow, and memory returned in a rush. The market. The attack. Cassian. She pushed herself out of bed, still wearing yesterday's dress, and found a wash basin on the dresser with fresh water. Someone had been in her room while she slept. The thought should have terrified her, but she was too tired for fresh fear. She washed her face and hands, studying herself in the mirror. The scar looked darker this morning. Angrier. She traced it with one finger, thinking about Cassian's words. Blood seal. Old magic. Found her blood, it was impossible. She was nobody. She'd always been nobody. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Alara Thorne. Alara Thorne. Alara Thorne. Cassian's voice, low and deliberate. True names have power, he'd said. She unlocked the door. He stood in the hallway looking exactly as he had last night. Same clothes, same impossible beauty, same stillness. Of course, vampires didn't sleep, didn't change, didn't age. I brought breakfast, he said, gesturing to a tray on the hall table. Such as it is. I don't keep much human food on hand, but there's bread and cheese and some fruit that might still be edible. Ilara's stomach growled. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Cassian picked up the tray and carried it into her room, setting it on a small table by the window. We need to talk about what happens next. Ilara sat and picked at the bread. It was fresh, still warm. Where did you get this? The village. They're accustomed to my presence. He settled into a chair across from her, with the careful control of someone always aware of their own strength. I've lived here long enough that I'm considered eccentric rather than threatening. I pay well. I don't cause trouble. They don't ask questions. Do they know what you are? They suspect. The old families remember the houses, remember the days before the purge, but there's an understanding. I leave them alone. They leave me alone. He watched her eat with an intensity that made her self-conscious. Alara, I need to examine your scar properly. In daylight. If it truly is a founder mark, there will be signs, patterns in the scarring, old language written in the tissue itself. Ilara's hand went to her face protectively. It's just a burn. Humor me. She wanted to refuse. The scar was ugly, shameful, a reminder of everything she'd lost, but Cassian's eyes held something like desperation, and she found herself lowering her hand. He rose and approached slowly, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. This close, she could see the fine details of him, the way his skin had no pores, no imperfections, like porcelain. The way he didn't quite look at her but at the scar, as if it were a text he was trying to read. May I? He raised one hand, palm up, asking permission. Something in Ilara's chest loosened at the gesture. Yes. His fingers touched her face with butterfly gentleness, tracing the path of the scar from temple to jaw. His skin was cool, but not unpleasant, and his touch was so careful it made her throat tight. No one had touched her face since the fire. Not even Marcus in those last awful days. Extraordinary, Cassian breathed. His eyes had gone distant, focused. The pattern is there, hidden in the tissue. See? He tilted her face toward the window light. These curved lines within the scar? That's old script, pre-house language. And here, at the temple, this spiral, that's a founder mark. The seal of the bloodlines who held the original pacts with my kind. I don't see anything, Ilara whispered. It's just damage. To human eyes, yes. But vampire sight reads deeper. We see the magic written into flesh, the oaths carved into bone. His thumb traced the spiral pattern she couldn't see, and his voice went soft. You're descended from the founding 12, the families who first learned to tame vampire nature, who created the blood oaths and taught us civilization. Your blood remembers every pact, every promise, every law written in the old days. He pulled back, his expression troubled. House Karis would kill to possess you. Literally. They'd drain you, preserve your blood, use it to legitimize their claim to rule all houses. Ilara pushed back from the table, the bread forgotten. So what am I supposed to do? Hide here forever? No. Cassian stood, pacing to the window. We need to bring this to the Night Court. Force House Karis to defend their attempted claiming in front of the other houses. If we can prove they violated neutral territory and attempted to bind you without consent, they'll be forced to withdraw. The old laws are strict about that, and if they don't withdraw, then we have bigger problems. He turned back to her, and she saw calculation behind his eyes. But there's a complication. For me to bring a case to the Night Court, I need standing. Legal recognition as a House Lord, which I haven't had since the Purge. so we can't go to this court. I didn't say that. A ghost of a smile. There's an option. An old law rarely invoked. If a vampire without house standing takes a mortal under protection, and that mortal bears founder blood, they can petition for house restoration. Temporary. Just for the duration of the legal matter. But it would give us the standing we need. Alara stared at him. You want to restore House Vale? Just for this? I want to keep you alive, Cassian corrected. House restoration is simply the means. But yes, essentially, I'm asking you to help me rebuild what was destroyed. Even if it's only an illusion, only paperwork and protocol. It would give us weapons House Karras can't easily counter. She should say no, should walk away from this madness. But she thought about the vampire's knife at her throat, about the cold certainty in his eyes. House Karras wouldn't stop, and she had nowhere else to go. What would I have to do? She asked quietly. Enter a blood oath with me. Not binding, nothing that would strip your will or your freedom. Just a formal partnership, recognized by law. You'd be under House Vale's protection officially, and I'd be bound to keep you safe. He held her gaze. It would tie us together, Alara. Your fate to mine. That's not a small thing. And if I say no, then I'll do everything in my power to protect you anyway. But our options will be limited. He moved closer, and she saw something raw in his expression. I won't force you, won't trick you. That's not how I operate. But I need you to understand. House Karras won't stop hunting you. The mark is incomplete, which makes you a loose end. They'll send assassins until you're dead or claimed. Those are your choices if you run. Alara looked down at her hands, at the calluses from needlework, at the scars from a life of hard use. She'd survived the fire, survived Marcus's betrayal, survived 3 months of loneliness so profound it felt like drowning. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving. This blood oath, she said slowly. Tell me exactly what it means. No pretty words, just truth. Cassian's eyes softened. Fair, all right. The oath would create a bond between us, magical, semi-permanent. I'd be able to sense your emotional state, know if you're in danger or distress. You'd feel some of that from me as well, though not as strongly. The bond would last until the legal matter is resolved, or until we formally break it, which requires specific rituals. Would you be able to control me? No, that's not how founder blood oaths work. They're partnerships, not enslavements. The old families created them that way deliberately. Humans had the blood magic. Vampires had the strength. Neither could dominate the other. Would I have to feed you? The words tasted strange. Not in the way you're imagining. Cassian's voice remained steady, clinical. Blood oaths require a small exchange at the creation, a few drops, mixed and shared. After that, no. I have other sources. I won't take from you unless you offer freely, and I won't ever put you in a position where you feel obligated. Alara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd trusted Marcus too, and look where that had led. As if reading her thoughts, Cassian added quietly, I know you've been hurt. I know trust doesn't come easily anymore. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. Just enough to take this first step. After that, you can decide every day whether to stay or go. The oath binds me to protect you. It doesn't bind you to anything but survival. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a clock tower struck 9, morning deepening toward day. Alara thought about the boarding house, her empty room, the life that had become a slow process of disappearing. All right, she said. Show me how it's done. Chapter 4. Blood and Binding. The ritual room was in the heart of the house, down 3 flights of stairs, and through a door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Cassian led the way with a lamp that cast jumping shadows against stone walls, and Alara followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was my family's sanctum, Cassian said, his voice echoing in the narrow stairwell. Where we conducted house business, settled disputes, made binding oaths. It's been empty since the purge, but the wards still hold. Nothing can interrupt us here. The room at the bottom was circular, carved from the living rock. Ancient symbols covered the walls, spirals and sigils that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than her eyes could process. In the center stood a table of black stone, and on the table, a silver bowl and 2 small knives with carved handles. Ilara stopped in the doorway. This looks like something from a nightmare. It's older than nightmares, Cassian said, and there was something in his voice, reverence, fear, that made her skin prickle. The founders built these sanctums, human magic and vampire craft, woven together. The oaths made here can't be broken by lies or betrayal, only by death or formal dissolution. Comforting. He smiled slightly. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. But they both knew there wasn't another way. Not really. Ilara stepped into the room, and the door swung shut behind her with a sound like finality. Walk me through it, she said, proud that her voice stayed steady. Every step. I want to know what I'm agreeing to. Cassian moved to the table, his movements precise. First, we each make a small cut, palm or wrist, your choice. The blood goes into the bowl. Then we speak the words of binding, the old formula. As we speak, we mix the blood with our hands, creating the physical connection. Finally, we each take a drop of the mixed blood, just a drop, onto our tongues. That seals the oath. And then you'll feel it. A warmth in your chest, a tightness like a thread pulling taut. It fades after a few hours, but the connection remains. He picked up one of the knives, testing its edge with his thumb. It parted his skin without effort, and blood welled up, darker than human blood, almost black. The pain is brief, I promise. Ilara approached the table. Up close, she could see the bowl was covered in more of those impossible symbols, spiraling inward toward the center. What happens if I break the oath? You can't. Not in the sense you mean. The oath doesn't constrain your actions. You're free to leave, to refuse, to change your mind about anything. But the magical bond remains until it's formally dissolved. If you try to run from House Karis without my protection, the bond will pull at you, cause discomfort. Not pain, but awareness, a reminder that you're tethered to something larger than yourself. That sounds like a leash. It's not. Cassian set down the knife and looked at her directly. I know how it sounds, but the founders designed these oaths specifically to prevent abuse. The bond is reciprocal. I'll feel your distress, your fear, your anger. If I hurt you, I hurt myself. If I betray you, the oath burns me from the inside out. That's the check on my power. That's why founder blood oaths were the foundation of the peace. Ilara studied his face, looking for deception. But she saw only tired honesty, and something else. A loneliness so deep, it made her chest ache in sympathy. All right, she said. Let's do this before I lose my nerve. Cassian handed her the second knife. Palm or wrist? Palm. She'd already ruined her face. Her hands might as well match. They stood on opposite sides of the table. Ilara pressed the knife to her palm, feeling the sharp edge, the promise of pain. She'd survived fire. This was nothing. She cut. The pain was immediate and bright, and blood welled up faster than she expected. She held her hand over the bowl, watching red drops fall into silver. Cassian cut his own palm, swift, efficient, and added his blood to hers. It mingled in the bowl, red and black swirling together, and Ilara could swear she saw light beneath the surface, as if the blood itself was burning. Repeat after me, Cassian said. His voice had changed, gone deeper, resonant. He placed his bleeding palm over the bowl, and Ilara matched the gesture, their hands hovering inches apart. I offer blood to seal the ancient pact. I offer blood to seal the ancient pact, Ilara repeated, and her voice echoed strangely in the circular room. I bind myself to this oath, protection for loyalty, strength for trust, life for life until the debt is paid. I bind myself to this oath, protection for loyalty, strength for trust, life for life until the debt is paid. The words felt heavy on her tongue, weighty with meaning she didn't fully understand. Let the founders witness. Let the blood remember. Let the oath be sealed in flesh and spirit. Ilara repeated the final lines, and Cassian plunged his hand into the bowl. She did the same, and their palms met in the blood. His cold, hers warm, both slick and binding. Cassian's fingers laced through hers, and she felt a jolt like lightning, like falling, like flying. The room spun. The symbols on the walls blazed with light, and Ilara heard voices, hundreds of them, thousands, whispering in languages she didn't know. The blood in the bowl boiled, and she felt heat rushing up her arm into her chest, wrapping around her heart like a fist. Then it stopped. Cassian released her hand and lifted the bowl. His eyes had gone completely black, pupil and iris indistinguishable. "One drop," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "On the tongue, to seal what blood has written." He tipped the bowl to his lips, took the smallest taste, then held it out to Ilara. The blood inside had stopped swirling. Now it looked like liquid silver, gleaming in the lamplight. Ilara took the bowl with shaking hands. "Don't think. Just do it." She touched the edge to her lips and let a single drop fall onto her tongue. The taste was copper and ice and something else. Something ancient. The warmth in her chest exploded into heat, and she gasped, stumbling back from the table. Cassian caught her, steadying her, and she could feel him. Not just his hands on her arms, but him, his presence, like a second heartbeat beneath her own. "Easy," he murmured. "It passes. Just breathe through it." Ilara breathed. The heat faded to warmth, the warmth to a gentle pressure behind her sternum. But the awareness remained. Cassian, there, real, close. Not physically close, but there, at the edge of her consciousness. "Is this normal?" she managed. "Yes. The bond settling. You'll feel it most strongly for the first few hours. Then it becomes background noise. Unless one of us is in distress." He stepped back, giving her space, and she felt the distance like a rubber band stretching. "How do you feel?" "Like I drank starlight." The words came out without thought, and Cassian laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. "That's actually a good description." He looked down at his palm. The cut had already healed, leaving only a thin white line. "We're bound now. House Vale lives again, at least on paper. Tomorrow I'll send word to the Night Court. They'll summon us within the week." Ilara examined her own palm. The cut was still there, still bleeding sluggishly, but she could feel it healing faster than it should. "What do I do until then?" "Stay here. Learn what you need to know to survive the court. They'll try to test you, break you, find weaknesses. The other houses aren't kind to humans, even those with founder blood." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Ilara, thank you for trusting me with this." "I haven't decided if I trust you yet," Ilara said honestly. "But I trust that you need me alive, and right now, that's enough." Something flickered across Cassian's face, hurt, respect, but it was gone before she could identify it. "Fair enough. Come. You should eat something. Blood oaths drain the living, and you need to keep your strength up." They climbed back up the stairs, and Ilara became acutely aware of how the bond made her conscious of Cassian's mood. A low hum of satisfaction mixed with worry. It should have been invasive, but instead it felt oddly comforting. She wasn't alone in her fear. He was afraid too. Back in the main house, morning had turned to afternoon. Cassian led her to a kitchen that looked frozen in time. Copper pots, hanging from hooks, a massive hearth, windows overlooking an overgrown garden. He rummaged through cupboards and produced bread, hard cheese, apples. "I'll arrange for more food," he said, assembling a plate with surprising domesticity. "And clothes. You'll need proper attire for court, something that projects strength without arrogance." Alara took the plate but didn't eat yet. "What's the court like?" Cassian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Imagine every nightmare about vampire society made manifest. 7 houses, each with their own territory, their own armies, their own agenda. They meet once a month to settle disputes, negotiate treaties, and generally try not to start a war. It's held in the Undercroft, a cavern system beneath the old city. No sunlight, no escape, no weapons allowed except those bonded to house lords. He smiled grimly. "It's theater and bloodsport combined. You'll be examined, questioned, possibly challenged. They'll want to see if you're truly founder-blooded or if I'm running a con. And if they decide I'm not, then they'll likely kill you as a fraud, and me for wasting their time." He said it casually, but she felt a spike of anxiety through the bond that belied his tone. "But you are founder-blooded. The oath wouldn't have taken otherwise." The magic knows. Alara forced herself to take a bite of bread. It tasted like dust, but she chewed and swallowed. "Tell me about the houses. Who are they? What do they want?" Cassian settled into a chair across from her, and for the next hour he painted a picture of vampire society that was equal parts fascinating and horrifying. 7 great houses, each named for an ancient concept. Keres for death, Moira for fate, Nyx for night, Erebus for shadow, Ananka for necessity, Kronos for time, and Vial, his house, for twilight, the space between day and night. Mortal and immortal. We were the mediators, Cassian explained, and she heard old grief in his voice. The house that kept peace between humans and vampires, that upheld the founder oaths. That's why Keres wanted us gone. They've been pushing for full vampire supremacy for decades. They believe humans are cattle, resources to be managed, not partners to be respected. And the other houses let them purge you? Some protested. Nyx and Erebus both argued against it. But Keres had the numbers, and they framed it as house justice. Said Vial had betrayed an oath, violated sanctuary. It was a lie, but a convincing one. His hands clenched on the table. 300 vampires, gone in a single night. My parents, my siblings, cousins, oathed servants, everyone who carried the Vale name. I was in the north, hunting a rogue vampire who'd been killing mortals. By the time I got word and raced home, there was nothing left but ash and accusations. Alara reached across the table without thinking and placed her hand over his. His skin was cold, but he didn't pull away. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Time doesn't make it hurt less. Just differently." Cassian looked at her hand on his, and something in his expression cracked. "No, it doesn't." He turned his hand over, palm up, and she felt the echo of the oath, the connection between them humming like a plucked string. "You understand that? Loss that changes shape but never leaves." "The fire," Alara said quietly. "It didn't just take my face. It took my future, everything I'd planned, everyone I thought I'd be. And then Marcus looked at me and couldn't see past the damage." She pulled her hand back, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry. You don't need my sob story." "I want your story," Cassian said, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "If we're bound, if we're going to face the court together, I need to understand you. Not just your blood, but you. What drives you, what scares you, what you want from a life that's suddenly become very complicated." Alara looked away, toward the window in the garden beyond. "I don't know what I want anymore. I used to want marriage, children, a shop of my own. Small dreams, simple. Now," she laughed bitterly, "now I'm bloodbound to a vampire, marked by magic I don't understand, and apparently descended from people who made pacts with immortal creatures. I don't even know who I am anymore." "Then we'll figure it out together." Cassian stood, and she felt his resolve through the bond. Steady, determined, protective. "Starting with teaching you how to navigate the court without getting killed. If Keres is going to challenge our claim, you need to be able to defend yourself. Not physically. They won't allow mortal violence in the Undercroft. But verbally, intellectually. You need to become someone they can't dismiss or destroy. And how do I do that?" Cassian smiled, and for the first time, she saw a hint of the predator beneath the gentleman. By learning to think like a vampire. We have 3 days before the summons arrives. Let's make them count. Chapter 5. Lessons in the Dark. The library was vast and forgotten. 3 stories of books climbing toward a glass ceiling that let in pale afternoon light. Dust motes swirled in the air, and the smell of old paper filled Alara's lungs as Cassian led her through rows of shelves packed with volumes in languages she didn't recognize. House. Vale collected knowledge like other houses collected territory, Cassian said, running his fingers along spines with the reverence of someone visiting old friends. Treaties, histories, genealogies, everything needed to understand vampire law and founder magic. It's all here, if you know where to look. He pulled down a massive tome bound in dark leather and set it on a reading table. When he opened it, Alara saw pages covered in dense script, illuminated margins, diagrams that seemed to shift when she looked at them directly. This is the Codex Noctis, Cassian said, the foundational text of vampire law, written in the first decade after the founding, when humans and vampires were still learning to coexist. Every house lord has to memorize significant portions. You need to understand at least the basics. Alara stared at the text. I can't read this. It's not in any language I know. It's written in Old Nocturnal, the original language of vampire culture. But look. He placed his hand over hers and guided her finger to a line of script. The oath we made includes a language transfer, part of the bond. You can understand me when I speak in Nocturnal, and you can read it, though it'll take concentration at first. He was right. As Alara focused on the words, they seemed to squirm and reshape themselves, and meaning emerged like dawn breaking. She read aloud, stumbling over the pronunciation. No vampire may claim a human without free consent. No human may bind a vampire without blood price paid. First law, Cassian said. The foundation of everything. Consent above all else. That's what makes Karis's attempted claiming illegal. You never consented, and they tried to force the mark. But don't vampires take humans all the time? Feed on them, kill them? Feeding and claiming are different. Feeding is complicated. Some humans consent, offer themselves willingly in exchange for payment or protection. Others are taken by rogues who don't follow house law, and those rogues are hunted when found. But claiming, making a human part of your house, binding them with magic, that requires explicit consent. Always has. Alara turned the page, her finger tracing the elaborate script. The next section detailed blood oaths, their creation and dissolution, the rights and responsibilities they conferred. She read for what felt like hours. Cassian answering questions, explaining nuances, bringing down other books when she needed clarification. She learned that founder-blooded humans were rare now, diluted by centuries of mixing with non-blooded families. She learned that the original 12 families had wielded magic that could constrain vampires, force them to honor their word, even destroy them if they broke faith. She learned that the purge of House Vael hadn't been the first time a house was destroyed, and probably wouldn't be the last. The system is fracturing, Cassian said as twilight deepened outside. The old laws were based on balance. Human magic checked vampire power. Vampire strength protected human fragility. But human magic is fading. Most families have lost the knowledge, lost the blood. Without that check, vampires like Karis see no reason to honor the old ways. So they're trying to seize control before the balance tips completely. Exactly. And you... He tapped the page showing founder bloodline markers. You represent the past they're trying to erase. If you can stand in front of the court and prove you're founder-blooded, prove that human magic still exists, it undermines their entire argument for supremacy. Alara leaned back, her head spinning. No pressure then, Cassian's mouth quirked. The court will test you. They'll ask you to demonstrate your blood. Usually that means activating one of the founder talents, compulsion resistance, oath sensing, or blood reading. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Moments where you could sense lies? Or where someone tried to influence you and couldn't? Alara thought back over her life. 23 years of ordinariness, of poverty, of struggling to survive. I don't think so. I'm not special, Cassian. I'm just... Look at me, he said, and his voice took on a strange quality, layered, compelling, like multiple voices speaking in harmony. Tell me you trust me completely. Say the words. Alara opened her mouth. The words were there, ready to spill out, and part of her wanted to say them. But something in her chest, that warm place where the bond lived, pulled tight, and she couldn't. I can't. That's compulsion resistance, Cassian said, and his voice returned to normal. Relief flooded through the bond. I just tried to compel you to speak against your will. Most humans can't resist vampire compulsion. It's one of our oldest talents. But you did. That's founder blood protecting you. You compelled me? Anger flared, hot and sharp. Without asking? I asked you to demonstrate your talents. This was the fastest way. He raised his hands in surrender. I apologize. I should have explained first. But Alara, this is crucial. The court will do worse. They'll try to break you, force you to admit you're a fraud. You need to know you can withstand it. The anger faded, replaced by exhaustion. What else can I do? We'll find out. But first you need rest. It's getting dark, and you've been reading for hours. He stood, closing the codex with care. Tomorrow we'll work on court protocols, how to address the House Lords, how to navigate challenges, how to stay alive when everyone in the room wants you dead or controlled. You really know how to motivate a girl. Cassian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I won't lie to you, Alara. The court is dangerous, especially for humans. But you're not alone. The bond means I'll know if you're in distress. I can't always stop it, but I can intervene. And house law still means something to most of the lords. They won't kill you outright, not without cause. How comforting. Alara stood, her legs stiff from sitting so long. The library felt different now. Less like a tomb, more like an armory. Knowledge as weapon. Cassian, why are you doing this? Really? You could have walked away in the market. Let Karis take me. Stayed hidden. He was quiet for a long moment, and through the bond, she felt confusion, as if he was asking himself the same question. I don't know, he finally admitted. When I saw you standing there, scarred and defiant and refusing to apologize for existing, something in me woke up. I've spent 15 years in the shadows, hiding, surviving, but not really living. And then you happened, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to have something worth protecting. He met her eyes. Maybe I'm selfish. Maybe I needed you as much as you needed saving. But whatever the reason, we're in this together now. Ilara studied his face. Beautiful, inhuman, but somehow earnest. Okay, tomorrow you teach me how to survive your world. Tonight I sleep. Deal? Deal. They walked back through the darkening house together, and Alara felt the bond humming between them. Not quite comfortable, not quite strange. Just there, constant, a reminder that she was no longer alone. Chapter 6. The Summons. The messenger arrived at midnight on the third day, just as Cassian had predicted. Alara was in the library, poring over a text on court protocols, when she felt it. A spike of alertness through the bond, sharp and sudden. Cassian appeared in the doorway moments later, moving with that impossible vampire speed. Stay here, he said. Don't come down until I call for you. But Alara wasn't good at following orders. She marked her place, crept to the top of the stairs, and listened. The front door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of winter and something else. Old magic, ozone, blood. A voice spoke, neither male nor female, echoing with unnatural resonance. House Vial is summoned to the Night Court in 3 days' time to defend its claim of restoration. Failure to appear will result in forfeit of all rights and execution of the petitioner. I understand, Cassian replied, his voice carefully neutral. House Vial will answer the summons. The mortal must come as well, the one bearing founder marks. She will be examined. She will come under my protection, with all rights accorded to a housebound human. Laughter, cold as winter stars. If she survives the examination, perhaps. The court looks forward to testing young Vales. Confidence. A pause. Tell me, Lord Cassian, do you truly believe you can restore what was destroyed? Your house died with honor, but it died. Some things should stay buried. Through the bond, Ilara felt Cassian's rage, controlled, banked, but burning. House Vale lives as long as I draw breath. The court will acknowledge that, or explain why they fear one vampire and a mortal girl. Silence. Then, 3 days. The Undercroft, midnight. The door closed with a sound like a coffin ceiling. Ilara descended the stairs. Cassian stood in the entry hall, holding a scroll sealed with black wax. His hands were shaking, barely, but she could see it. "You heard?" he asked without turning. "Most of it." "Who was that?" "A court herald. Neutral party, bound by oath to deliver summons without bias. The fact that they delivered veiled threats means Karis has been spreading poison. They're trying to turn the other houses against us before we even arrive." He broke the seal and unrolled the scroll, scanning the contents. "As expected, we're charged with unlawful house restoration, fraudulent blood claim, and, this is interesting, interference in lawful vampire business." "Interference?" "I killed 2 of their operatives in the market." Cassian's smile was grim. "They're spinning it as unprovoked assault rather than defense. Clever. It puts us on the defensive from the start." Ilara sank onto the bottom step. 3 days. 72 hours until she walked into a room full of ancient vampires who wanted her dead or controlled. Her hands felt numb. "I'm not ready." "You're more ready than you think." Cassian sat beside her, closer than he usually allowed, himself, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. "You've absorbed more court law in 3 days than most humans learn in a lifetime. You can resist compulsion. You've survived fire and betrayal. You're stronger than you know, Ilara." "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He turned to look at her, and in the dim lamplight, his eyes seemed almost human. "I won't let them hurt you. I know I've said that before, but I need you to understand. The oath we swore binds me to your protection above everything else, including my own survival. If it comes down to a choice between your life and mine, the magic will choose yours. That's how founder oaths work." "That's not comforting." "It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true." He stood, offering his hand. "Come. One more lesson before the court. Something I should have taught you first." He led her back down to the ritual room, the circular chamber deep beneath the house. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow in the lamplight, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. "When we made the oath, I told you it was reciprocal," Cassian said, "that I'd feel your distress. But I didn't tell you the full extent of the bond. Founder oaths don't just connect emotions. They can share strength. If you're in danger and I'm close enough, you can draw on my power. Not much. You're human. Your body can't channel vampire strength for long without damage, but enough to survive a few crucial moments. How? The bond is like a door between us. Right now it's closed, but in extremity you can open it. Call for me through the connection, and I'll answer." He moved to the center of the room, where the black stone table still stood. "Try it now. Reach for me through the bond." Ilara closed her eyes and focused on that warm place in her chest. She could feel Cassian there, a presence hovering at the edge of her consciousness. She pushed toward him mentally, and cold flooded her veins. Strength surged through her muscles. Her senses sharpened until she could hear Cassian's breathing, smell the old stone, feel the vibrations of his heartbeat through the floor. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "Now let go," Cassian said, his voice tight. "Push it back to me." Ilara released the connection, and the power drained away, leaving her gasping. She opened her eyes to find Cassian steadying her, his hands on her shoulders. "That's what you can access," he said. "In the court, if someone attacks you and I can't reach you physically, call for me that way. It won't save you from everything, but it might buy you time." It felt like drowning and flying at the same time, Ilara managed. Vampire power through human veins. It's not natural, and it takes a toll. Use it only in desperation. He released her shoulders but didn't step back. They stood inches apart, and Alara could feel the bond humming between them, stronger now, tested, real. Alara, I need to know. If the court offers you a way out, if they say you can walk away free if you dissolve the oath, will you take it? She should say yes. Should take any escape route offered. But she looked at Cassian, ancient, deadly, lonely, and thought about the library full of books, the ritual that had burned magic into her blood, the 3 days of lessons and careful respect. No, she said. We started this together. We finish it together. Something in Cassian's expression cracked, and for just a moment, she saw past the vampire to the man beneath, grieving, hoping, terrified of hoping. Then we'll face them as House Vael. Both of us. Both of us, Alara agreed. Chapter 7. The Undercroft. The entrance to the Undercroft was hidden beneath an abandoned church in the old quarter of Ashenmere. Cassian led Alara down through a crypt, past tombs carved with names she didn't recognize, to a door that looked like solid stone, until he pressed his palm to it and spoke words in Old Nocturnal. The stone melted away, revealing stairs that descended into darkness so complete it seemed alive. Stay close, Cassian murmured. He wore formal attire now, a coat of deep blue velvet embroidered with silver, marking him as House Vael. His hair was pulled back, exposing the sharp lines of his face, and he moved with a dangerous grace that made Alara's pulse quicken. She wore a dress he'd had delivered, midnight blue to match his coat, with fitted sleeves and a high neck that covered the scar on her throat. The fabric whispered as she moved, and she felt simultaneously powerful and exposed. They descended. The stairs went on forever, spiraling down into the earth. Alara counted 500 steps before she lost track, her legs burning with effort. Cassian didn't breathe hard, didn't tire, just kept walking with that inhuman steadiness. Finally, they reached a landing. 2 massive doors stood before them, carved with all 7 house sigils. As they approached, the doors swung open, and sound rushed out. Voices, laughter, the clink of glass. Beyond lay the Undercroft. It was beautiful in a terrible way. A vast cavern lit by thousands of floating lights, not lamps but magic, cold witch fire that cast no shadows. The space had been carved and shaped over centuries, turned into a cathedral of vampire culture. Pillars rose toward the ceiling, carved with histories and laws. Tables were arranged in a great circle, 7 sections, each flying the banner of a different house. And everywhere, vampires. Hundreds of them, beautiful and deadly, dressed in finery that spanned centuries of fashion. They turned as Cassian and Alara entered, and the conversation died to whispers. House Vael, someone announced. Lord Cassian Vael and his bound mortal, Alara Thorne. The whispers intensified. Alara felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. Cassian's hand found hers, cold fingers lacing through her warm ones, and she felt his strength through the bond. Steady. I'm here, they walked into the circle. 7 thrones stood at the center, each occupied by a house lord. Alara recognized them from her studies. Lady Moira of Fate, her silver hair piled high, her eyes black as space. Lord Nyx of Night, young-looking but ancient, with power radiating from him like heat. Lady Erebus of Shadow, beautiful and terrible. Lord Ananke of Necessity, stern and scarred. Lord Kronos of Time, who looked bored with immortality. And at the head, on the largest throne, Lord Caris of Death. He was not what she expected. Where the others were beautiful, he was handsome, brutally so, with harsh features and dark skin and eyes that held nothing but contempt. He wore crimson and black, and when he smiled at Cassian, Alara felt ice race down her spine. Lord Cassian, Caris said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the cavern. How nostalgic. I haven't seen you since we killed your family. You look well. Hiding agrees with you. Cassian's hand tightened on Alara's, but his voice stayed level. Lord Caris, still compensating for inadequacy with cruelty. Some things never change. Dangerous laughter rippled through the crowd. Caris's eyes narrowed. Careful, little Vael. You're here on sufferance, not by right. We granted you this audience, but that doesn't mean we'll suffer your insolence. You granted me this audience because old law requires it, Cassian countered. I invoked blood right, claimed a founder-blooded mortal, and petitioned for house restoration. Those are my rights under the Codex, or do you deny it? We deny nothing, Lady Moira said, her voice like silk over steel. But we question. House Vale was purged for breaking faith. What makes you think you can restore a dishonored name? House Vale was purged based on false accusations, Cassian said. Accusations that were never proven, charges that were never defended. Karis wanted us gone because we stood in the way of his expansion. That was murder, not justice. Bold words, Lord Nick said, leaning forward. But ancient history, what matters now is your claim. You say you've bound a founder-blooded mortal. Prove it. All eyes turned to Alara. She felt her throat go dry. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. My name is Alara Thorne, she said, and was proud that her voice didn't shake. I bear the marks of the founding bloodlines. I offer myself as evidence of House Vale's right to restoration. Anyone can claim founder blood, Karis said dismissively. Show us. Demonstrate your power. Alara stepped forward, releasing Cassian's hand. The bond stretched between them but held. She touched her scar, feeling the lines of old magic buried in the tissue. I bear the Founder's seal, burned into my flesh by fire that should have killed me. I survived because my blood remembered what my mind had forgotten. Convenient, Karis sneered. A scar is just a scar. Give us proof, or be judged a fraud. Lady Erebus stood, moving with liquid grace. Let me test her. If she's truly founder-blooded, she'll withstand compulsion. She approached Alara, and the temperature seemed to drop. Look at me, child. Alara met her eyes. They were silver, depthless, hypnotic. Lady Erebus spoke, and her voice became layered, compelling. Kneel. Admit you're a fraud. Tell Lord Cassian he's wasted his house on a lie. The command crashed into Alara's mind like a wave. She felt her knees wanting to buckle, felt the words rising to her lips. But that warm place in her chest, the bond, the oath, the founder magic, pulled tight, and she stood firm. No, she said. Silence. Then Lady Erebus smiled. Interesting. Again, kneel and forswear your claim. No. The vampire's smile widened. Very interesting. One more time, with all my power. Kneel, forswear, and renounce House Vale, or I will tear out your throat. Every instinct screamed at Alara to obey. But she thought of Cassian, of the library, of 3 days learning to be more than a scarred girl everyone pitied. She reached through the bond, found Cassian's strength, and pulled. Cold power flooded her veins. She stood straighter, looked Lady Erebus in the eye, and said clearly, No, I am founder-blooded. I resist your compulsion by right of blood and oath. I stand with House Vael. The cavern erupted in whispers. Lady Erebus stepped back, something like respect in her silver eyes. She's genuine. The resistance is too clean to be anything else. I acknowledge her blood. Lord Nick stood next. I'll test as well. With your permission, Lady Erebus. Given. He approached Alara, and this time the compulsion was different. Not commands, but visions. She saw herself leaving the Undercroft, walking into sunlight, forgetting Cassian, living an ordinary life. It was beautiful, tempting, safe, and completely false. Nice try, Alara said, and shoved the vision away. But I've lived the safe life. It didn't make me happy, Lord Nix laughed. Genuine amusement. By the old dark, she's got steel in her spine. I acknowledge her blood as well. One by one, the House Lords tested her. Lady Moira tried to read her fate and found it clouded by founder magic. Lord Ananke attempted to bind her with necessity, and found she could refuse. Lord Kronos tried to age her perception, make minutes feel like hours, and she weathered it without breaking. Only Karis refused to test. He sat on his throne, radiating cold fury. This proves nothing. So she resists compulsion. That doesn't give Vael the right to restore his house. It certainly doesn't erase his family's crimes. What crimes? Cassian demanded. Name them. Show proof. Your father broke a blood oath, revealed house secrets to mortals, endangered vampire kind. Lies. All of it. Cassian's voice rang out across the cavern. My father upheld every oath. Your accusations were fabrications designed to justify genocide, and now you're trying to silence me again, because I've done what you feared most. Found a founder-blooded mortal, and restored the balance. Karis rose, and the temperature in the Undercroft plummeted. Careful, Cassian. You're very close to challenging me directly. Then consider yourself challenged, Cassian said softly. I invoke the right of House Trial. You accuse House Vale of breaking faith. I accuse House Karis of murder, false testimony, and attempted unlawful claiming. Let the court decide. The cavern went silent. Alara felt her heart hammering. House Trial. Cassian had explained it during her training. A formal duel, governed by ancient rules, where the winner's claim was accepted as truth. It was also usually fatal. Accepted, Karis said, and his smile was sharp as knives. Tomorrow at midnight. Traditional rules. To first blood or true death, challenger's choice. The court will witness. To true death, Cassian said, and Alara felt his certainty through the bond. One of us ends this. Chapter 8. The Night Before. They left the Undercroft in silence, climbing the endless stairs with the weight of tomorrow's trial pressing down on them. Alara's legs trembled with exhaustion by the time they reached the surface, but Cassian showed no sign of fatigue. He moved like a storm contained, all that deadly power held in check by will alone. The carriage was waiting. They climbed inside without speaking, and as the horses carried them through the dark streets toward Cassian's estate, Alara finally found her voice. You're going to fight him. Yes. To the death. Yes. And if you lose? She hated how her voice cracked on the words. Cassian turned from the window to look at her. In the dim interior light, his face was a study in shadow and bone structure. If I lose, you run. The bond will guide you to safety. There's a failsafe built into founder oaths. You'll have 3 days of protection, enough time to reach neutral territory. I don't want to run. Alara, I don't, she insisted. I'm not asking you to throw the fight or to refuse the challenge. I understand why you have to do this, but don't tell me to run. Don't make plans that don't include both of us surviving. Something flickered in Cassian's expression. Surprise? Hope? But it was gone before she could read it fully. Karis has 500 years of combat experience. He's survived 3 house wars and countless duels. I've been hiding for 15 years, avoiding fights, staying out of sight. The odds aren't in my favor. Then we change the odds. Alara leaned forward. You've taught me about vampire law, about court protocols. Now teach me about vampire combat. There must be rules, limitations, things we can exploit. You can't help me in the trial. It's single combat, witnessed by the court. No interference allowed. But I can help you prepare. She reached across the space between them and took his cold hand. You said the bond lets me draw on your strength. Does it work the other way? Can you draw on mine? Cassian stared at their joined hands. In theory, yes. Founder oaths were designed for reciprocal exchange, but human strength is limited. What you could offer me wouldn't make a significant difference. What about human will? Human determination? Alara squeezed his hand. You've spent 15 years surviving, Cassian. That's not the same as living, not the same as fighting. But I've spent the last 3 days learning that I'm more than what happened to me. That this scar, she touched her face with her free hand, doesn't define me unless I let it. Maybe that's what you need. Not just power, but a reason to win instead of just trying not to lose. The carriage turned onto the long drive leading to the estate. Through the window, Alara could see the Gothic towers rising against the stars, dark and imposing, and somehow less lonely than when she'd first seen them. You're remarkable, Cassian said quietly. Do you know that? Most humans would have broken by now. Run screaming from the court, from me, from all of this. But you're sitting here trying to figure out how to help me win an impossible fight. It's not impossible. Difficult, maybe, but not impossible. Alara felt the bond humming between them, that constant awareness of his presence. Besides, I have a vested interest in your survival. If you die, I'm marked for death by House Karis. Enlightened self-interest. Cassian laughed. Really laughed, the sound filling the carriage with unexpected warmth. Enlightened self-interest. I'll remember that when I'm facing Karis across a dueling ground. They reached the house. Cassian helped her down from the carriage, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. The night was cold and clear, and Alara could see her breath misting in the air while Cassian breathed nothing at all. Inside, the house felt different. Less like a tomb, more like home almost. Alara realized with a start that she'd grown accustomed to the dusty grandeur, the empty rooms, the silence broken only by their voices discussing law and magic and survival. "I should let you rest," Cassian said, but he didn't move toward the stairs. "I'm not tired." A lie. She was exhausted. But the thought of going to her room, lying awake and worrying, was unbearable. "Show me where you'll fight. Tell me the rules. Let me understand what you're facing." Cassian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, come." He led her back down into the depths of the house, but this time they went past the ritual chamber to another door she hadn't noticed before. Beyond it lay a circular arena carved from stone, about 30 feet across, with symbols etched into the floor and walls. Every old house had a dueling ground, Cassian explained, for settling disputes, testing warriors, conducting trials. House Vales hasn't been used since the Purge, but the wards still hold. He stepped into the center of the circle, and the symbols flared with pale light. Traditional combat rules are simple. No weapons except those bonded to your blood. No magic except what flows through the oath marks you bear. No outside assistance. First blood ends a trial of honor. True death ends a trial of justice. What does bonded to your blood mean? Every house lord carries a blade bound to their bloodline. It can't be taken, can't be wielded by another. Mine is... He held out his hand, and shadows coalesced in his palm, forming into a long dagger with a blade that seemed to drink light, shadow-forged. Created when I was sworn as Vale's heir, it remembers every oath I've taken, every promise I've kept. Ilara circled him slowly, studying the blade. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like frozen midnight. What will Karess have? A sword, most likely. House Karess favors heavy blades, weapons that end fights quickly. Cassian's expression darkened. He'll try to overwhelm me with speed and power, force me into mistakes. He's fought this way for centuries. He knows every trick. Then don't fight his way. Ilara stopped in front of him. You said House Vale was about Twilight. The space between. Don't try to match his strength. Use what makes you different. And what makes me different? You've spent 15 years learning to survive without a house, without backup, without resources. You've become something he can't predict. A vampire who thinks like a human, who adapts instead of relying on ancient power. She met his eyes. He's fighting for dominance. You're fighting for survival. That's different. That makes you dangerous in ways he won't expect. Cassian stared at her, and through the bond, she felt something shift, a loosening, a releasing. Say that again. You're dangerous in ways he won't expect. No, before that. That I think like a human. Well, don't you? After 15 years alone, dealing with mortals, staying hidden, you've had to adapt, learn to see from their perspective. She stopped. That's it, isn't it? That's the advantage. You can fight like a human. Unpredictable, creative, willing to break patterns. House Vael was always the bridge between mortal and immortal. Cassian's voice was distant, thoughtful. We understood both worlds. My father used to say that was our strength and our weakness. We could see all sides, which made us mediators, but also made us vulnerable to those who saw only one path. Karess only knows vampire thinking. Vampire pride. He'll expect you to fight with honor, to follow old patterns. Ilara felt excitement building. But what if you don't? What if you fight dirty? The court wants a good show. They want to see if you're worthy of restoration. Prove you are by winning however you can. She grabbed his free hand, the one not holding the shadow blade. Teach me the rules. All of them. Every technicality, every loophole. We have until midnight tomorrow. Let's find every legal advantage you can exploit. For the first time since they'd left the Undercroft, Cassian smiled. Really smiled, with something like hope in his eyes. You're terrifying, Ilara Thorne. Has anyone ever told you that? Not recently. Now stop complimenting me and start teaching. They spent the night in the dueling ground. Cassian explained the rules while Ilara took notes, her mind racing through possibilities. She learned that no outside assistance meant direct interference, but information gained before the trial was fair game. She learned that bonded weapons could be enhanced by the wielder's blood, but that enhancement came at a cost of strength. She learned that the arena's wards prevented death magic, but allowed everything else. Most importantly, she learned that Cassian was stronger than he thought he was. 15 years of survival had honed instincts that 500 years of house privilege could never match. He was faster, more adaptable, more willing to think 3 moves ahead instead of relying on brute force. "You can win this," Alara said as dawnlight began filtering through the high windows. "Not easily, not safely, but you can win." Cassian had shed his formal coat hours ago, working through combat forms and shirt sleeves, and Alara had watched his movements grow more fluid, more confident. Now he stopped, breathing unnecessarily hard, a habit of mortality he'd never quite broken, and looked at her. "I haven't felt this alive in 15 years, he said. "That's your doing. The bond, yes, but also just you. The way you refuse to give up, refuse to accept defeat. It's infectious." "Good." Alara stood from where she'd been sitting on the arena's edge. "Because we're not done. You need to rest, or whatever vampires do instead of sleeping. And I need to prepare." "Prepare for what?" "I'll be at the trial. In the court's gallery, which means I'll be surrounded by vampires who either want you dead or don't care if you die." She smiled grimly. "I may not be able to help directly, but I can make sure no one interferes from the outside. I can watch for treachery, and if it comes to it, I can draw on the bond to give you strength when you need it most. That could hurt you, damage you permanently. Then we'll make sure you don't need it until the very end." She crossed the arena to stand in front of him. They were close now, close enough that she could see the faint silver in his eyes, could feel the cold radiating from him like winter given form. "Cassian, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you get the chance to kill Karis, take it. Don't hesitate, don't offer mercy. He won't give you a second chance." Something dark flickered across Cassian's face. "That's not who I am. I'm not an assassin. No, you're not. You're a survivor. And sometimes survival means doing hard things." She placed her palm over his heart, or where his heart would be if it still beat. "I don't want you to become a monster, but I also don't want you dead because you hesitated. Promise me you'll do what's necessary." Cassian covered her hand with his, pressing it against his chest. "I promise. But Alara, if something goes wrong, if Karis finds a way around the rules, or if the other houses turn against me, I need you to promise you'll run. Take the bond's protection and get to neutral territory. And if I refuse, then I'll die knowing I failed to protect you, and that will be worse than any death Karis could give me." His eyes held hers, intense and burning. "Please, promise me," Alara wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his expression, felt it through the bond. Not fear of death, but fear of failing her. "All right, if it's hopeless, if there's no other way, I'll run, but only if it's truly hopeless. I'm not giving up while there's still a chance." "Fair enough." Cassian released her hand, stepping back. "You should rest, really rest. The trial starts at midnight, but we'll need to arrive early. The court will want to inspect the dueling ground, set wards, establish witnesses." "What time is it now?" "Nearly dawn. You have maybe 12 hours. He gestured toward the door. "I'll wake you when it's time." Alara climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. But as she reached her room, she paused. Through the bond, she could feel Cassian still in the dueling ground, running through combat forms, preparing himself mentally for what was coming. She sent a thought through the connection. Nothing complicated, just a feeling, "I believe in you." The response came back immediately, wrapped in cold determination and something warmer she couldn't quite identify. "That makes one of us." Alara smiled and went to bed. Chapter 9. The Trial of Blood. The Undercroft was transformed, where before it had been set for court business, tables, thrones, social gathering, now it was configured for combat. The center of the cavern had been cleared, revealing a dueling circle carved into the stone floor, and inlaid with silver that gleamed in the witchlight. 7 thrones ringed the circle at equal distances, and behind them, tiered seating rose into shadow, where hundreds of vampires waited in anticipation. Alara stood in the gallery, reserved for housebound mortals and honored guests, surrounded by beautiful predators who watched her with barely concealed curiosity. She wore the midnight blue dress again, with her hair pulled back to expose her scar. Let them look. Let them see what she was, scarred, mortal, and unafraid. Cassian stood at the north point of the circle, wearing formal combat attire, dark leather reinforced with silver, fitting close to his body, allowing freedom of movement. His shadow blade hung at his side, and his face was a mask of calm concentration. But through the bond, Alara felt his nerves, his fear, his determination. Karis stood at the south point, resplendent in crimson and black, carrying a massive sword that looked like it could cleave a man in two. He was smiling, confident, relaxed. 500 years of victory showed in his stance. Lady Moira stood between them, her voice carrying through the cavern with supernatural clarity. We are gathered to witness a trial of blood between House Karis and House Vielle. The challenge: Lord Cassian Vielle accuses Lord Karis of murder, false testimony, and unlawful claiming. Lord Karis denies all charges and counter-accuses House Vielle of oath-breaking and endangering vampire kind. As is traditional, the victor's claim will be accepted as truth. The trial is to true death. Only one leaves this circle alive. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Combatants, state your oaths. Karis spoke first, his voice ringing with power. By House Karis, by blood and bone, by death eternal, I swear to uphold our laws and destroy this pretender who dares challenge our justice. Cassian's voice was quieter, but no less intense. By House Vielle, by Twilight's promise, by the oaths of the Founding, I swear to prove the truth and end the tyranny of lies. Then let the trial begin. Lady Moira raised her hand, and the silver circle flared with light. No magic but what you carry. No weapons but what you're bonded to. No mercy but what you choose to grant. The court bears witness. She dropped her hand. Karis moved first, crossing the circle in a blur of speed. His sword came down in an arc that would have split Cassian from shoulder to hip. But Cassian wasn't there. He'd rolled aside, coming up with his shadow blade extended, going for Karis's exposed side. Karis spun, blocked, and the two blades met with a sound like thunder. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena, and Alara felt Cassian's arm go numb through the bond. He was outmatched in raw strength. They both knew it. But strength wasn't everything. Cassian gave ground, letting Karis advance, drawing him into a pattern. Strike, block, retreat. The older vampire smiled, clearly thinking he was dominating, but Alara could see what Cassian was doing. He was studying Karis's rhythm, learning his preferences, finding the patterns in 5 centuries of combat habit. Karis struck high. Cassian ducked, slashed low, caught the vampire's thigh. First blood, but not enough to matter. The wound sealed almost instantly, and Karis laughed. Is that the best you can do, little Vielle? Your father fought better than this before I killed him. Alara felt rage spike through the bond. Cassian's control wavered for just a moment, but that was enough. Karis pressed forward, his blade a blur of crimson-tinted steel. Cassian blocked, parried, gave ground steadily toward the edge of the circle. The crowd was murmuring. This wasn't going to be a long fight. Karis would wear Cassian down, force a mistake, and end it. Don't fight his way, Alara thought fiercely through the bond. Remember what makes you different. She felt Cassian's acknowledgement, a flash of understanding. Then he did something unexpected. He dropped his blade. The crowd gasped. Karis hesitated, sword raised, confused. What are you doing? Fighting like a Veil, Cassian said, and dove forward under Karis's guard. What followed wasn't elegant. Cassian fought like a street brawler, like someone who'd spent 15 years doing whatever it took to survive. He went for eyes, throat, joints, vulnerable points that honorable vampire combat traditionally avoided. He used his smaller size as an advantage, getting inside Karis's reach where the massive sword was useless. Karis stumbled back, genuinely surprised. He tried to bring his blade around, but Cassian was already moving, shadows wrapping around his hands like gauntlets. He struck Karis's wrist, and the sword clattered free. Illegal, someone shouted from the gallery. He's using shadow magic. His blade is shadow forged, Lady Erebus called back coolly. The magic is bonded to him. That's within the rules. Karis's expression had gone from confident to furious. He lunged at Cassian, fangs extending, clearly intending to rip out his throat. But Cassian twisted aside, grabbed Karis's extended arm, and used the vampire's own momentum to throw him across the circle. Karis crashed into the silver boundary and screamed. The wards flared, burning where he touched them. He rolled away, smoke rising from his back, and when he stood, murder blazed in his eyes. You fight like a coward, Karis snarled. I fight to win, Cassian corrected. He'd retrieved his shadow blade and now he held it low, ready. You've spent centuries relying on power and intimidation. I've spent 15 years learning that. Sometimes the only way to beat a stronger opponent is to refuse to play by their rules. Then die like a rule breaker. Karis's hands erupted with crimson light, death magic, forbidden in the Undercroft, but clearly beyond his ability to care. He hurled it at Cassian in a wave of destructive power. The arena's wards should have stopped it, should have contained death magic the way they'd contained his earlier attempts at lethal force. But Karis had been planning this. Alara realized with horror that he'd corrupted the wards somehow, seeded them with his power during the earlier inspection. The death magic slammed into Cassian, and he went down hard. Through the bond, Alara felt pain, excruciating, overwhelming. She gasped, her own chest burning in sympathy. Foul. Lord Nyx was on his feet. Karis has violated trial law. Disqualify him, Lady Moira demanded. But Karis was already moving toward Cassian's fallen form, clearly intending to finish this before anyone could intervene. His blade was back in his hand, raised for a killing blow. No, Alara thought. No, this doesn't end like this. She reached through the bond with everything she had, not just calling for Cassian's strength, but offering her own. Her mortality, her determination, her absolute refusal to let him die. The connection blazed open, and she felt power flowing between them, human warmth meeting vampire cold. Cassian's eyes snapped open. As Karis's blade descended, he rolled aside, came up fast, and drove his shadow blade up through Karis's guard, through his ribs, into his heart. The cavern went silent. Karis staggered back, looking down at the blade embedded in his chest with something like disbelief. I had help, Cassian said quietly, from someone who understands what it means to survive against impossible odds. From someone who refused to let me fight alone. He twisted the blade, and Karis screamed, and I had justice on my side. Your accusations were lies. My house died for nothing. But it won't stay dead. He pulled the blade free, and Karis collapsed. The mighty Lord of Death fell to his knees in the center of the silver circle, blood, black as midnight, pooling around him. House Vael claims victory, Cassian said, his voice carrying through the shocked silence. I demand Karis's confession before he dies. Let the court hear truth from his own lips. Karis laughed, a wet, choking sound. You think? You've won. House Karis has 50 vampires waiting outside. They'll tear you apart the moment you leave here. Then it's fortunate that I'm not leaving, Cassian said. Lady Moira, Lord Nyx, Lady Erebus, I invoke right of sanctuary. House Vale request protection under court law while we petition for full restoration. Granted, Lady Moira said immediately. Under the circumstances, the court finds in favor of House Vale. Lord Cassian, your accusations are accepted as proven. House Karis will be investigated for trial fraud, murder, and conspiracy. All claims against mortals bearing the Karis mark are hereby suspended pending review. Karis tried to speak, to object, but blood filled his mouth. He collapsed forward and his body began to dissolve into ash, the final death, irreversible. The court erupted in chaos. Some vampires cheered, others protested. But Cassian just stood there, covered in ash and blood, looking up at the gallery where Alara was already pushing through the crowd to reach him. She met him at the circle's edge. He stepped over the silver boundary, and she threw her arms around him, not caring that he was cold and bloody and that hundreds of vampires were watching. You did it, she whispered against his chest. You actually did it. We did it, Cassian corrected. His arms came around her, holding her tight. I felt you through the bond at the end. You gave me everything. You could have died. But I didn't. And neither did you. That's what matters. She pulled back enough to look up at his face. What happens now? Cassian glanced around the Undercroft. At the assembled houses, at the 7 thrones, at the world that had rejected him 15 years ago and now had to accept him back. Now we rebuild, for real this time. House Vale rises from ash and twilight, and we do it right. Both of us, Alara asked. Both of us, Cassian confirmed. Then, in front of the entire court, he smiled. If you'll have me, that is. The oath binds me to protect you, but everything else, partnership, trust, what we build together, that's your choice. Alara looked at him, ancient, deadly, wounded, hopeful, and thought about 3 days of lessons. Nights in the library, a bond that connected them deeper than anything she'd known before. Ask me again in a week, she said, when we're both less exhausted and covered in ash. But for now, yes, both of us. Chapter 10. Twilight Rising. 6 months later, House Vale's estate no longer looked like a tomb. The dead trees in the drive had been replaced with saplings that would grow for centuries. The windows blazed with light every evening. The halls that had echoed with 15 years of silence now filled with voices, servants, petitioners, visitors from other houses. Alara stood in the library, now organized and catalogued, with new volumes arriving weekly from scholars eager to curry favor with the restored house. She was reading a treaty proposal from House Nyx when Cassian appeared in the doorway. Still working? He asked. He'd changed since the trial. Not physically. Vampires didn't change, but in bearing. He wore the confidence of a house lord now, the burden of responsibility. But when he looked at her, something softened. It's nearly midnight. You should rest, says the vampire who doesn't sleep. Alara set down the treaty. How was the meeting with Erebus? Productive. She's agreed to support our proposal for founder blood protections. Says she was impressed by what you did at the trial. Cassian moved into the library, his steps quiet on the stone floor. The court is changing, Alara, slowly, but changing. Your presence there, a human standing equal to vampires, it's making them rethink old assumptions. Not all of them. No, Cassian admitted. House Moira is still pushing back, and Ananka thinks I'm using you as a political tool. But enough of them are listening. That's a start. Alara studied him in the lamplight. 6 months, and the bond between them had deepened, grown more comfortable. She could sense his moods without trying now, and he claimed he could read hers the same way. It was intimate in a way she'd never experienced. Closer than she'd been with Marcus. Deeper than friendship. But it wasn't romantic. Not yet. They'd both been too busy rebuilding House Vale, navigating court politics, hunting down the remaining Karis conspirators. Too busy surviving to think about what else they might become to each other. Cassian, Alara said slowly. The oath. We made it to secure legal standing to survive the court. That's done now. We could dissolve it if you wanted. Let me return to human life. He went very still. Is that what you want? I'm asking what you want. I want. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in that gesture that meant he was genuinely uncertain. I want you to be happy. To have a life that's yours, not defined by vampire politics and ancient oaths. If that means dissolving the bond, then... That's not what I asked. Alara crossed the space between them, standing close enough to feel the cold radiating from him. What do you want, Cassian? Not what you think I want. Not what's proper or strategic. What do you want? He looked at her for a long moment, and through the bond she felt layers of emotion. Fear, hope, longing, uncertainty. I want you to stay. I want to keep building this house with you, keep fighting for a world where humans and vampires stand as equals. I want to learn what else this bond could become, if we gave it time and space to grow into something beyond survival. He touched her face gently, fingers tracing the path of her scar. But I won't trap you. If you want freedom, I'll give it. The oath was made in desperation. You shouldn't be bound by it forever. Alara smiled. What if I like being bound to you? What if I've discovered that surviving together is better than being alone? She covered his hand with hers, holding it against her scarred face. I'm not asking to dissolve the oath, Cassian. I'm asking if you want to build something more. Something that's not about legal standing or house politics, but about us. Whatever that might be. I'm immortal, he said quietly. You're not. Even if you stayed, I'd watch you age, watch you die. I've lost everyone I loved once already. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do it again. Then we'll figure it out together. Day by day, year by year. Maybe I'll choose mortality. Live my human life with you as my partner. Maybe I'll choose otherwise when the time comes. But that's a decision for later. She stood on her toes, bringing them nearly eye to eye. Right now, I'm asking, do you want me? Not the founder-blooded mortal who saved your house. Not the political asset. Me, Alara. Scarred and stubborn and probably making a terrible decision. Cassian's arms came around her, pulling her close. Yes, God help me, yes. I've wanted you since the moment you refused to apologize for existing. I've been trying not to want you because it seemed unfair, manipulative. But yes, I want you, Alara Thorne. For however long you'll have me, she kissed him. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, wondering what it would be like to kiss someone whose lips were cold, whose heart didn't beat, whose very nature was death and darkness. But when their mouths met, she discovered that cold could be refreshing. That stillness could be peaceful. That darkness could be safety. Cassian made a sound low in his throat. Surprise, pleasure, relief, and deepened the kiss. The bond between them flared, and Alara felt the full force of his emotion. Longing held in check for months. Hope he'd been afraid to acknowledge. Affection that had grown from respect into something deeper. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, unnecessarily in his case, necessarily in hers, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. That was ill-advised, he murmured. Probably, Alara agreed. Want to do it again? He laughed and kissed her again, slower this time, with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world and was choosing to spend it with her. Outside, midnight came and went. The court would meet again next week, and there would be new challenges, new threats, new battles to fight. House Karis's remaining members were already plotting revenge. House Moira was pushing for stricter controls on founder-blooded humans. The balance between mortal and immortal was still fragile, still contested. But in the library of House Vale, surrounded by books and history and the weight of centuries, Alara and Cassian chose to focus on the present, on each other, on the partnership they'd built from desperation and oath magic, and discovered was worth keeping even when survival was no longer the only consideration. So, Alara said when they finally separated, do we tell the court about this? Or do we keep it private? What would you prefer? Private for now. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. We'll reveal it when we're ready, on our own terms. She smiled. Besides, I like the idea of having something that's just ours. Not house business, not political strategy, just us. Just us, Cassian agreed. He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. Though I should warn you, vampire courtship is complicated. There are rituals, traditions, expectations. The court will have opinions. Then it's fortunate I've never been good at meeting expectations. Alara took his hand, lacing her warm fingers through his cold ones. We'll make our own traditions. Build something new. That's what House Vale was always about, wasn't it? The space between the bridge? Twilight, Cassian said softly. Neither day nor night, but its own time. Its own rules. Exactly. Alara pulled him toward the door. Now come on, you're going to teach me more old nocturnal, and I'm going to convince you to actually eat human food with me even though you don't need to. I don't eat. You could if you wanted to. You've told me vampires can consume food for pleasure even if it doesn't sustain them. Stop making excuses and join me for breakfast. Or dinner. Whatever meal it is at midnight. Cassian followed her out of the library, and his laughter echoed through the restored halls of House Vale. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, court politics, vampire machinations, the eternal question of mortality versus immortality. But they'd face it together. The scarred girl who'd learned she was descended from power, and the vampire lord who'd learned that hiding wasn't the same as living. In the twilight between their two worlds, they were building something new. Something that honored the old oaths while creating space for new possibilities. Something that acknowledged the darkness without letting it consume the light. And as dawn approached, that liminal time when night gave way to day. When Cassian would retreat to his chambers and Alara would finally sleep, they both knew this was just the beginning. House Vale had risen from ash and silence. Now it was time to see what it could become.